Carrie Yu, Senior Advisor of PricewaterhouseCoopers. I've been involved in the retail and consumer products industry for over 20 years and have been witnessing the evolution of China retail during this period. Indeed, since the year 2000, for over 15 years, the China retail have witnessed rapid development. But in the past few years, things have changed. The market environment is more challenging, and the environment is more difficult to handle. How do Chinese retailers, and how should they react to this environment and still achieve profitable growth? Here, I'm very pleased to welcome Professor Ananth Raman from Harvard Business School. This is the area that he has been tracking for the past 20 years as well, and seeing how retailers all over the world have been adapting to this change. Ananth, so you have a lot of experience in this area. Can you shed some light? How do the retailers in different parts of the world manage to handle this tricky problem?
Okay, fair enough, Carrie. And as you pointed out, there are numerous contexts where we see a period of rapid growth followed by a period of more measured growth, and sometimes even a negative growth in certain contexts. And good companies, whether it be retailers or not, learn to adapt with the changing times, and that is really important over here. And I think there are three broad areas I would like to touch upon. One is the area of metrics and KPIs, to use how should those change when the context for the business changes. The second thing is what's the role of training, and again going back to the role of people. A third theme over here would be what's the role of process and process discipline. Now, before I get into all of those, I just wish to say something about what we have witnessed between 2000 and 2015 in the retail sector in China, and maybe in other sectors in China as well. It is a remarkable achievement. What has been seen over here, it is double-digit growth going on for roughly 15 years, while also being very profitable. It is not very common to see that combination that we witnessed in China over here. As a consequence, the number of stores that are developed, the number of people who have been developed who know how to operate in a retail context, it's a very large number, and I think this is a great foundation for what the industry can build on for the next 5, 10, 15 years. Retail in China is at an inflection point, and it is a time where it's come out of this remarkable phase, which is a deeply humbling phase for somebody who's not first-hand involved in in the retail sector in China. But I think at this point, Chinese retail can learn from other parts of the world, the experience of retailers in other parts of the world. But Chinese retailers also have a lot to contribute in terms of knowledge as well.
And innovations.
Absolutely, and this exchange of ideas is something that I think bodes well. One of the things that we have learned over time is innovation can come from everywhere. It can come from anywhere, literally. And no country, no industry, no individual has a patent on innovation. So there are always innovative ideas that emerge from just different contexts. And just like China can learn from the United States and India and Australia, and other countries can learn from China, this would be a remarkable opportunity. But let me just then dig into each one of these different areas that will probably enable Chinese retail industry to transition over time from a period of, let's call it, hypergrowth to a context of more measured growth. But I'd like to start with metrics and KPIs. And typically what happens during a period of hypergrowth, the focus for most companies is on growth.
The top line.
It's the top line. That becomes the focus, because if you gain share and if you gain volume, typically profits are there for the taking. Now that changes in a more competitive context. And now the focus over here, it has to be some blend of growth as well as, let's call them, productivity metrics. Mm-hmm. And I want to use productivity metrics a little more broadly than some people might use it. You got to look at, first of all, you got to look at the productivity of space, of square footage or square meterage, maybe in a. So if how much can you sell in a store of, let's say, 1,000 square meters? If you can enhance your ability, if you can squeeze more sales out of the same footprint, then that's
so it's the sales per square feet or square meter.
Right, absolutely. Sales per square foot and sales per square meter. What we need to remember is retail is a high gross margin, low net margin business. It's a high fixed cost business. So it would be common, for example, for a retailer to have sales of $100 but profit of $5. I mean, good retailers will often have profit of only $5.
5%.
5%. But their gross margins might be 50%. So if they could take their sales, let's say, with the same fixed cost, if they could take their sales, so let's say they're selling $100 and making $5, if they take their sales from $100 to $110, but their gross margin is 50%, their bottom line, if the fixed costs remain unchanged, their bottom line goes from $5 to $10. So that additional $10 of sales gave added $5 of profit.
So it's 10%.
Sales,
that is a big
sales
increase.
By 10%, but profit increased 100%.
Yeah.
Now, so you could play around with the numbers, but that's the productivity of real estate. There is also the productivity of labor. And again, look, labor is a huge asset, but also very significant cost for retailers. And I think successful retail industries, now I'm using the industry perspective, not just a firm, have steadily improved labor productivity. I tend to be more familiar with data from the United States, where the retail industry has exceeded mine and most people's expectations by steadily improving labor productivity at 3% a year for many decades. And it is a remarkable story. If you think about, had that enhancement not been achieved, it would have affected even the inflation rate for the macro economy. Well, so that's the second one, labor. The third one is capital. Look, if you want to attract capital, you've got to use capital in a productive way. And that is the role of any steward of capital. And if you're a retail CEO, you're a steward of capital. You need to manage that well. And let me double down and talk specifically about one specific type of capital, which is the capital that gets invested in inventory. Now, this is a really important one to pay attention to for a whole bunch of reasons. First of all, it's risky capital. It can quickly become, because inventory can lose value very quickly.
Obsolete.
Obsolete inventory, perishable inventory, and so that inventory that today is worth $100 could quickly become worth $5 or $10 or $50 or $0 tomorrow, depending on the change in circumstances. So it is capital that can lose value very quickly if you don't pay attention to it. The other thing is retailers are frequently making decisions about how to allocate capital to different types of inventory. So should they allocate the marginal dollar to product A in store 1, or should they allocate it to product B in store 2? And the question over here is, well, where do you get the better return? So if I took that dollar and invested it in product A in store 1, maybe I'd earn, 30% return per year. But if I take that same dollar and invest it in product B in store 2, I could get 40% return. And that is, I think, and retailers have so much opportunity to allocate their inventory to where they'll get the best return.
So the U.S. U.S. retailers, so they are very much focusing on these KPIs, important KPIs. Hence, we can see improving labor productivity by 3% per annum.
Absolutely, and similarly, they are very focused on inventory turns as well. The best retailers. Like in every other industry, there is tremendous diversity of performance. There are good retailers and bad retailers, just like there are good car manufacturers and the bad car manufacturers. And over time, the capitalist system shakes out the weaker performers and the stronger performers grow.
So the U.S. Census actually have quite a number of KPI relating to retail.
Absolutely, and I think that is something that many other sectors and many other parts of the world can probably at least consider that as an example. I would consider mimicking what the US has done. But look, each country has to decide on its own. But I think the opportunity to collect operational data at the detail level, build a big database that others can learn from. It's, students can write projects, academics can write papers, consultants can build practices
and improve it further.
Exactly, and it is a shared asset that everybody, that the entire industry can benefit from, to figure out what works, what doesn't work, and I think if we use those data to identify approaches that work and then celebrate those approaches, then I think over time, again, 3% a year doesn't seem like a lot in 1 year, but compound that over 30 years, and it is remarkable how much impact you can have.
Definitely. These statistics and data is useful at the industry level as well as the individual company, where they can compare and ensure that they are progressing and improving at least every quarter.
Absolutely. This is so. I really think it can be a wonderful asset, and whether it be done, some of these data are collected in the United States by the government, and some by industry groups. But whatever it is, the fact that they are assembled and then available for public consumption, I think has benefited the industry over the long term.
Yeah, great point. Yes, thank you.
So let's talk about training, because training is going to be absolutely vital. Again, look, people are the most important asset that any retailer has. People account for a significant portion of costs that a retailer incurs. But training, training can take many different forms. To make a retailer operate more productively, training can take many different forms. One aspect of training, let's call it, is training on tasks. Every detailed task, from how do you clean the bathroom, to how do you stock shelves, to how do you throw away obsolete products, to how do you check the temperature in the fish counter and ensure it's right, or in the refrigerator or in the freezer, that it's in the right band, and what do you do if it's not? These kinds of tasks people can be trained on, and I think the more people can move towards training on every detailed task, the better performance is. Now, sometimes it's a little tedious to work through each of these steps, but it is that attention to detail that explains the magic of retail.
Yeah, and then the management training.
Absolutely. So that's the second piece over here. And very often I notice, Carrie, that when any industry goes through a period of rapid growth, you often see weaknesses in middle management.
Definitely.
And you'll see weaknesses in areas like, do you have people who have the ability to lead a team? And any store manager is, first of all, a team captain. They might be leading a team of 5 people or 50 people, depending on the size of the store, maybe even 100 people, depend. So being able to know how to lead a team of people, how to give feedback, how to motivate, how to schedule tasks, how to monitor people's performance. These are all extremely important tasks, roles that people can be trained for. I also think, as somebody who's taught for now over 26 years, I feel there is another aspect of training that is often lacking in middle management. And this one is something that I just wish to share with you. And I think people with leadership positions should think about what are the tools they are giving their middle managers to help with this.
The resource.
To help with this particular task that I want to talk about, which is going from a strategic goal, and the strategic goal is often stated as something like a 3-year goal, right? Or a 5-year goal, to tasks that I have to do today. So a store might say, or a region might say, or a company might say, we want to improve our sales, increase our sales by X% in 3 years. Well, now if you think about it, and organizations often put a goal like that, and then they put it in a big binder and lock it up, all right? But if I manage a department in a store, or if I manage a store, or if I'm a frontline worker, what do I need to do to help achieve that goal? Because we can identify a goal, but unless it translates, unless it changes specific tasks that I do at the frontline level, it's not. Why would the consumer suddenly start spending X% more? And you need to take that 3-year goal and break it down to, so where are we going to be 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 18 months from now? And then what are the tasks that we will have to do differently as a consequence?
So have to break down into different periods and specific tasks.
I think the great organizations have enabled their organizations to go from strategic priorities to tactics at the shop floor or sales floor level. And a lot of others are not as strong, and this is often, we call it the strategy execution gap. But great organizations enable that gap to systematically become smaller over time.
Right. So what you're stressing is the discipline to have very specific KPIs at a specific period of time, so then they can measure and then they ensure that they take action to reach the KPI.
Right.
That's very good. Thank you.
Well, let me talk about another thing, which is process, right? And process is extremely important in retail, And this is maybe, now, you've heard me say this in the past, Kerry, but out of chaos comes revenue, but out of discipline comes profit, And discipline is another word for process, that we have a process and we stick to it. And process of all, we should script almost every particular task that we do in a retail store. But what we need to understand is a process is not a static document. It needs to evolve over time. Great processes if we're doing the same thing day after day for 20 years in a row, it's not something to be very proud of. We need to get better over time. We need to look at what we did last month, last year, and say, can we do it a little better? And that's what enables that 3% enhancement over time, right? That can we serve our customers better? Can we use fewer resources? And that allows us to get better and better over time. Also, one of the things that we've learned is in contexts like retailing, where we're doing the operation in the presence of a customer, we need to know when not to stick to the process.
That's a great point.
Sometimes we have a process, but look, maybe a customer is distressed for whatever reason. He or she needs help. Well, don't stick to your process. I mean, the situation calls to act in let's call it a more empathetic way. But put the process aside and just do what you have to do in this particular.
Floor staff need to have this discretion, and all these need to be trained.
Exactly. So, but it's on a foundation of great execution and great process and then you say, now abandon the process if needed.
Yeah, all these are very great wisdom. And you have gained all these through witnessing successful companies who adapt to a slow growth environment in the past 20 years. So these are all the successful tips. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you. Yes.